Trauma Therapist Podcast, episode 516. All right, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to support and inspire new trauma therapists just starting out on the trauma-informed journey. I do that with my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0, my online courses and workshops, and the Trauma Therapist newsletter. If you're a therapist of any kind and you work with individuals who've been impacted by trauma, I invite you to head on over to my website at thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. All right, let's get started. All right. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am very excited to have as my guest today, Esther Perez. Esther, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. I'm very thrilled as well.
All right. So Esther obtained an MA in counseling psychology and an MA in spiritual psychology from the University of Santa Monica, California. As a bilingual senior trainer for Sensorimotor Psychotherapy Institute, Esther currently teaches across Europe. She's committed herself to deeply integrating a number of modalities supported in the emerging research on neuroscience and attachment. Embodying the spirit of unity, one of the core foundations of SPI, Esther studies how sensorimotor psychotherapy intersects with EMDR, internal family systems, and mentalization based treatment. Esther uses her learning to inform her work with adults, adopted children, and adolescents with attachment-related issues, complex trauma, and dissociation in her private practice in Malaga, Spain, in addition to counseling with graduates at various levels from SPI trainings. Awesome. All right, Esther, before we kind of jump in here, just share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you're calling from now currently, and then we'll dive in.
Yes, I am originally from Spain, Madrid, and I'm calling from Malaga, where I currently live.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. So let's just dive in here. How did you get into this field?
Well, actually, back in my undergrad at UCLA, I was very clear that I wanted to have an undergrad degree in psychology. But psychology itself at UCLA, even though it was magnificent, it missed the experiential kind of experience of it, if I will. And I then took a master's in spiritual psychology because I was involved in a compassionate research at UCLA before I left, and I wanted more of that relationship. So I did a master's in spiritual psychology, and then I went on and did a master's in counseling psychology and got my MFT. So I started working for public mental health in Los Angeles, California, at a very local, a very small clinic in Echo Park, one of those neighborhoods gang infested with the Hispanic population, lots of trauma, amazing families. It was just an incredible experience to work with them and with this multidisciplinary team that we were, with psychiatrists, with casework managers, with just an amazing experience. But, you know, we had a lot of trauma in our families, and despite the masters and the internships and all of that, I was missing something. Something was just not really working, because even though the cases were improving, I was seeing dissociation, I was seeing PTSD symptoms that I didn't know at that time how to address. So I went to one of these mega conferences in Los Angeles and saw Pat Ogden, the originator, the founder of Sensorimotor Psychotherapy, presenting on trauma and the body. And I was just blown away. I was blown away by the method because not only it seemed a very effective way to work with trauma, but also because of the foundational principles that Sensorimotor has in the backbone, because it was very close to the spiritual psychology approach that I was used to practicing from.
If I may say more about that specifically, those core principles and how they're close to the spiritual elements. Yeah.
Well, first I would say that having the body having the body very present when working with trauma is super important, because the person relieves the trauma, has that experience of re-experiencing through, especially the body, the somatic, dysregulated arousal, somatic symptoms, yes. So, but it was just the way I saw Pat trusting organicity, the organicity of the body. So the principles of sensorimotor psychotherapy are nonviolence, unity, organicity, holism, mind, body, spirit. And the main ingredient is relational mindfulness. So when you learn the method, it's not just a method, it's a way of being with the client, where yes, you have some skills that you use, but it requires for you to be very much in yourself. It helps develop a therapeutic presence that it requires for your nervous system to be calm, because from that calm place, the client's nervous system can calm down. And from there, you can see not only a symptom or, where client is stuck at, in their symptoms, but also you can see health. You can see health emerging. You can see something that wants to happen through the body organically because of the innate wisdom of the body, and it can lead the way to transformation, to whatever, whether it is discharge of arousal, whether it is an incomplete action that needs to happen that was truncated at the moment of the trauma. So it's very much, those principles work sort of in unison, because to be able to track for that wisdom of the body to emerge, you need to be present. You need to be in unity. You need to be in nonviolence, because you're going at the rhythm, at the pace of what the client's nervous system can handle at a particular moment. So it's very honoring and very empowering for the client to go at that pace.
Yeah. I love what you're saying. It's getting me excited, because I went through level 1 and level 2 of the SPI training with Janina Fisher. And I remember we would watch videos with Pat, and it was just so amazing and inspiring to see exactly what you're saying. Her just, you could see that trust in what you're saying of organicity, and just so grounded. I was like, oh my God, this was amazing. When you first started, obviously you were interested in the whole spiritual psychology, and you had that leaning, that calling, if you will. When the trauma piece came in a sense, when you were like, oh my God, when you started recognizing the trauma in your clients and the need to work in that, where to get that information, what was that like for you, Esther? Was it challenging for you? Were you like, oh my gosh, this whole other thing in a sense is coming into play, and I need to, learn more about that? Talk about that.
Absolutely. It was, even though we work with the parents of the kids, for example, to see how can we help them improve their parenting skills, the discipline skills, how can we help them recognize the signals of dysregulated arousal and help them do things that could regulate their kids and even themselves, to try to ease the trauma symptoms. And we could even have them talking about the stories that had led them to experience those symptoms. But the retelling of the story, sometimes it was re-traumatizing. I remember, when the parents would come with little kids to the office, and they would start talking about their stories or what had happened, during the week, because they were still in situations where they were experiencing trauma, maybe in an abusive relationship, or maybe with just difficulties in their lives. You could see like the very young kids that would fall asleep during the session when the parents were talking. And then I learned they're not just falling asleep, or they are going into what is called dorsal-vagal, because what the parents were talking about, it was too arousing. And the same way the sympathetic goes up, then the parasympathetic shuts you down. Or when the kids would be, or the parents, overwhelmed by talking about what had happened to them, we didn't know how to measure how much of the story or of the difficulties was it okay for them to talk at that time. We didn't have, I'm talking we as a team, but I'm going to speak about myself. I didn't have the particular skills or the knowledge to know that talking too much about the details of the story or the details of the traumatic experiences, even in the present, evokes too much implicit memory. Meaning evokes too much of that dysregulated arousal in the head. And now that the clients don't yet have that window of tolerance to manage. So many therapeutic mistakes in that regard, that I wasn't able to read the body signals that were letting me know, hey, that's too much. And we could have worked, I could have worked differently, working with parts, working with the inner system, working with the dissociation.
Can you get more specific? Obviously, I'm not asking you to share the identifying aspects of a client, but dial in there a little more about not recognizing certain signs, et cetera.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking right now of this adolescent. She was 13, 14 at that time. I mean, I saw her and we saw this family for quite a few years. And they came in because there was an alcoholic father that would be very violent, an abused mother. I mean, we were able to manage to get the father out of the home and provide safety for the family. But this girl had a twin brother that had just committed suicide because of what was happening. And she found the brother. And it was just devastating. And this girl was so dissociated because she was so cut off from her feelings and from her body. I mean, it was just her appearance. It was just this like horror face, but blunt affect. So of course, that was her survival resource. She had to dissociate. The mother also was very much in a submit response, dissociated. And the younger sister was very much in alert, in hyper arousal all the time, very dysregulated. And we thought it was more like ADHD, even though we knew we had PTSD symptoms. But I remember this adolescent that as much as I tried to get her to talk about the event we did a lot of sun play as well. And that was safer than talking about, because it was just this disconnect, this just like, because it was too overwhelming. That's just one example.
It was interesting that you said that each of those three people in the family were kind of exhibiting kind of different symptoms.
Yeah. And this was so common because sometimes I remember this other family where the mom was in jail because she had been a drug abuser and she had gotten in trouble with the law, and she had had several children along the way. And depending on where she was in regards to her addiction at the different times when she got pregnant, the different kids had different symptoms, because some of them had more attachment with the mom before she went on binges, and others just were left and were more of that, reactive attachment and more dysregulated. Another one was more avoidant type of withdrawn kind of kid. So yes, depending on the experience, on the age, and on the resilience of each individual in the family, they could display different trauma symptoms, absolutely. But all of them are traumatized.
Right. Okay, so you see Pat, she blows you away. Yes. What happens from there?
Well, I was super fortunate that she was just teaching, when she was teaching back then, she was teaching a level 1 trauma and the body in Los Angeles. And I jumped into that training. Wow. And she was my teacher for level 2, attachment and the body. And then she was my teacher for level 3. And when I was about to finish, she invited me to become a trainer because she thought I was doing fairly well. And they were starting to have some negotiations with Barcelona in Spain with bringing trainings there. So they thought me being Spanish and bilingual, I could be a candidate. So she invited me and I said, well, if you think I could do it, I can try. And I went on a journey of becoming teaching in training. And it has been 13 years now.
Wow, how
since.
exciting.
Yes.
Handpicked, hand plucked from the,
Yes.
wow, that's exciting, Esther. So one,
Very.
in your bio, you talked about kind of integrating these other modalities, which first of all, I have to admit, I don't know what mentalization based treatment is. Could you just give us a
Yes.
snapshot of what that is?
Well, it's a method originated by Peter Fonagy and Bateman, and they is pretty much designed or developed for personality disorders, especially borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, because many times when there is a diagnosis of PTSD, many times it comes with the person develops a personality disorder as well, or traits of personality disorder. So what happens is that they have, especially if it's complex trauma or attachment trauma, there is very much difficulty with relationships, meaning that they haven't developed the capacity to mentalize about themselves or mentalize about others, and their interpretations about others and what others do might be based on early trauma-based beliefs, so that the way they go about relating to others and interpreting the signals, it causes them a lot of dysregulation. It perpetuates the dissociation or the symptoms, because they don't have the capacity to just realize what is it that is happening to them, as far as the thoughts that they're having, how are they interpreting the other, and the emotions that they're feeling. So it's something that, sometimes we take for granted, because many people, the vast majority of people, might have the luxury or the privilege of grow up having parents that reflect, oh, you're feeling angry because your brother didn't let you borrow his toy. Yeah, that makes sense. So the parent, what is the parent doing? The parent is putting words into the kids' experience, of course, noticing how they feel, validating the experience, maybe also giving them tools, skills to manage that situation. So they're helping them develop emotional awareness and emotional intelligence and social intelligence. But where clients have experienced attachment trauma, they didn't have this attachment figure that helped them figure out how were they feeling, that helped them manage their emotions, that helped them mentalize about the other. Oh, it must be because the other also likes it. It's a new toy, and maybe they don't want to let me have it right now. So if a parent didn't help you mentalize about yourself and mentalize about the other, now you're going to have a lot of trouble in relationships. So it's about doing that process of mentalizing that is so needed.
Right. Yeah, that's fascinating. Just briefly, how did you decide to pursue and learn about that modality?
Well, because the more acquainted I got with complex trauma, and this has been actually only in the last, I would say, 7 years. I mean, I thought I knew quite a lot about trauma, but actually, no, I didn't. It was when I took Janina Fisher's courses in complex trauma and Kathy Steele courses in complex trauma that I realized, and also some other courses through EMDR on complex trauma and dissociation, I realized that, it is not just an easy process to navigate through a system, I would say, an inner system when someone has attachment trauma. It's a very different picture from single event trauma. So I realized that I needed to develop many skills, because dissociation, symptoms of dissociation or a dissociative disorder only improves if you're able to not only do stabilization and then trauma processing, you need to work through a number of trauma-related phobias that are very common with attachment trauma, and to be able to work through those attachment related phobias, phobia of internal experience, phobia of a particular part, of the system, phobia of inner conflict between parts, phobia of change, phobia of attachment, meaning attachment with the therapist or even with the therapist, so getting close or fearing abandonment. So the complex is much more, the system is much more complex than single event trauma. And as a clinician, you need a lot of skills, even though sensorimotor is my main, it's just a given. It's the way that I'm with my clients. I'm in mindfulness, and I am also always paying attention to implicit memory and how it shows through the body. But you also need other tools to be able to work through that complex system.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
deal with
wow,
dissociation.
that was a great explanation, and I love the way you articulated that. That's awesome. So, and then you mentioned parts, internal family systems, and so forth. I just find that fascinating, the way you've studied and kind of collected, if you will, these different modalities to help you with your clients and so forth. Let me ask you something. What is it, Esther, that you feel allows you to work with people who've been impacted by trauma?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. I feel privileged to have quite fairly regulated nervous system myself, because no matter how many methods or how many skills the therapeutic relationship and your own body is your best bet or your best asset. And mind you, I've been in therapy my whole life because I have my share of trauma, or more like attachment issues, but and also neurofeedback has helped me a lot to regulate and stabilize my nervous system. But the more I learn to work with my clients, the more I learn from them also. It's that feedback loop that it's helping me know how fast, how slow, what tool to use in the moment based on experience and every day just being mindful. And the mistakes, making mistakes with clients, maybe going too fast. Or I'll tell you another mistake. I still have some tendencies of preoccupied ambivalent attachment. So when vulnerable parts might come up in session, I get excited because I know this is an opportunity for client to go deep into their wound and tend to the child part that still holds trauma, memory or tendencies. So what happens is that I have to put myself on check to not use too much sweetness or attachment, my attachment system, because with attachment trauma, since there is an attachment phobia, if I evoke too much attachment with a sweet voice or with too much, it could be how do you say, counterproductive. because then if I'm reaching too much attachment with those younger parts, even though I have learned to facilitate, that is the client adult, to be with that part, still it can evoke those dependency needs in client, and the shame from the dependency needs, and then a fight part might come out. We have experienced before fight part towards me, even from evoking too much attachment. So what I have learned is that I myself need to be in my body, need to be mindful of what I do and how I do it and the impact it has on my client, to be able to track that and adjust accordingly, to evoke a bit, but not too much, either in the therapeutic relationship or in the trigger or whatever we're working with. So it's a very, tippy-toeing and, keeping that balance.
Right. Yeah.
To be effective.
Like you said before, just awareness, right? This like almost constant awareness of not just your client, but yourself, and having to matter. I mean, obviously that is where that takes a lot of experience. And like you said, a lot of work. You've been working on yourself for a long time.
Absolutely. And I will continue
Yeah.
on my parts and on my, history and my tendencies, because not just to be a better therapist, but for my own good, of course.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
As we kind of wind down here a bit, I want to ask you something. A lot of people listening to this podcast are wondering, there's so many modalities out there, right? I mean, how the heck does one decide to take a workshop in this or that? What would you say to someone who's out there who wants to learn about trauma or even learn more about trauma, in terms of where do they go? How do you begin to choose?
Yeah. Well, I think the experts recommend to learn a somatic modality for sure, because if you come from a cognitive behavioral background or a psychodynamic background, it's very easy to get sort of trapped in just using the cognitions or the emotions, right? But with trauma, we need to know that is get re-experienced through the body. So we need a somatic skill to regulate the dysregulated arousal and bodily sensation that comes with that trigger response. So what can I say? I love sensorimotor psychotherapy because it is such a safe, well-organized, and spiritual way of being with clients, that you learn to work with implicit memory, which is the key. You need to know how to identify implicit memory and how to work with it when you work with trauma. And mindfulness, that's the other ingredient. You need to evoke a bit in the here and now, work with that implicit memory, and have the client being mindful of what's happening in the here and now. And then go from there. I mean, each therapist is going to find their own path. Get informed, go to conferences and seminars and webinars, and see what's your calling. I mean, for me, it has been many times I have been inspired by my mentors like Janina Fisher as well, because in her book, she talks a lot about the interface between sensorimotor psychotherapy and internal family systems. So she inspired me to go and learn internal family systems after I have, of course, the background in sensorimotor. And it made a lot of sense. Right. And then I went to another conference and learned that I'm missing something else. And then I went on and took something else. And as I was implementing EMDR and this and that, and oh yeah, that's what I'm missing. Just to, but each person is going to have to find their own way about it.
Right. Awesome. Appreciate that. So people are listening to this. They're going to be saying, "Oh my God, I want to take a class from Esther. I'm serious. I know it. That's what I'm feeling." That. Do you teach, or what?
Absolutely. I teach full time. I'm a senior trainer throughout Europe. Currently, well, now because of the pandemic, of course, online, but Norway, Ireland, a bit of UK now, but online, mainly Italy, Utrecht in the Netherlands, and Spain. So they can sign up for they can go to sensorimotorpsychotherapy.org and see the courses upcoming. If it's not with me directly, because maybe they're in the US, right. There are other amazing faculty members that teach based on the US, because with the time difference, I don't teach in the US now. I used to when I lived there, but not anymore. Okay. But let me tell you, it's an honor and a privilege to share with mental health providers this method,
Yeah.
because it's a change of paradigm. Then you're with your client from a very different place, and then you can add on to that anything you want in the mix, you know.
Awesome.
So,
All right. So as we really close down now, how about that book recommendation? Are you going to share
yes.
Janina's book or what?
Well, one of them, yes, of course. Pat Kikuni Minton and Claire Payne have Trauma and the Body. Then the second one that Pat and Janina have written, Sensorimotor Psychotherapy, is actually full of worksheets that actually any therapist can just go through those worksheets, and it tells you step by step how to do resources, how to process traumatic memory, how, like, it's a how-to, you know, hands-on, very experiential. And then Healing the Fragmented Selves of Trauma Survivors, Overcoming Internal Self-Alienation by Janina Fisher. This is the one, I mean, it's a jewel. It's just a jewel. It's it's a very practical and heartfelt way of working with complex trauma, and how to help therapists helping clients develop an internal attachment instead of going from self-alienation to an internal safe attachment. So of course, what would I say? Onno van der Haar, Kathy Steele, and Suzette Boone, they have a newest treatment of dissociation, trauma-related dissociation. And my colleague in Spain, Dolores Mosquera, she's another guru of complex trauma and especially personality disorders. She teaches all over the world. This is another awesome book. It's called Working with Voices and Dissociative Parts and it's a guide also. It's like
awesome.
It's a guide for how to work with I mean, I'm thrilled. This is all like candy, like a kid in a candy store.
Awesome. Well, I'll have all those books linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Esther, man, you are awesome. I'd love to have you back. There's so much to talk about. And again, I really want to thank you for taking the time to join me. I know that the timing, time difference is rough, but it's been awesome. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me share about sensorimotor psychotherapy and about trauma in my clients. It's been a pleasure.
Be well. Take care.
You too. Take care.